so call the meeting to order. I don't think there's much more I need to say other than Mr. Councillor Tuppy is the chair of the corporate services, so I'll hand it to you, Councillor Tuppy.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge our First Nations. The Mayor and Council wish to acknowledge the town of Fort Smith is located within Treaty 8 territory. Treaty 8 territory also encompasses the traditional homelands of the Salt River First Nation, Smith Landings First Nation, and the indigenous Métis people of Fort Smith. These nations have maintained stewardship of the sacred lands throughout the generations. We honor your knowledge, teachings, traditions, and the land. We are mindful that colonization has not been kind. We respectfully recognize our generational histories and commit to strive for unity in the spirit of truth and reconciliation. Moving on with the agenda, can I have a motion to accept the agenda to be adopted as presented?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Thank you. Discussion, any questions? Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Over the past few days, there was a request for an addition to the agenda dealing with the NTPC power issues, and we just verify whether we'll be discussing that within corporate services, or are we going to move that to the protective services.
I think that would be better for protective services, but not.
It's totally up to council. Either one will be fine
Yeah.
for the discussion. I think protective services is a little more suitable though.
So all in favor for protective services? Motion carried, we'll do it in protective services.
I think you're just approving, there's a motion on the table right now. I think you're just approving whether or not
Oh,
the
sorry.
agenda is adopted
Yeah.
as presented.
Because it's one of the items I was one of the persons requesting it be added to the agenda, and as chair, I feel somewhat inappropriate being speaking to it as chair of the protective services. So if we could, I'd feel
We pass that to another member.
okay.
I
Or you
think-
could amend it.
I think you're asking to add this to F other business,
Yeah.
NTPC, for this under corporate services.
Well, we can do it under protective services. I'll just have to
Pass the chair.
pass it, chair.
Okay, your call. Do you want to add it to this one or you want to wait for protective?
Well, the majority council feels protective services is more appropriate, so I'm okay with that.
Okay, so the motion on the table is just approving the agenda as is then.
Carrying on, can I have a motion to accept the minutes from the corporate services
All in
committee?
favor for the agenda?
Oh, sorry, all in favor for the agenda? So carried.
Thank you.
Can I have a motion to accept the minutes from the corporate services standing committee meeting on December 3rd, 2024 be adopted as presented?
I move that the corporate services standing committee meeting on December 3rd, 2024 be adopted as presented.
I can second.
Any discussion? All in favor? So carried. And I'm assuming everyone's had a few moments to go through the visions and values review. Any declaration of financial interest? Seeing none, we'll move on. Delegations, I believe we have a delegation from the Northern Light Museum and Culture Center. Mr. Miltenberger?
Just to add to that, we've got in front of you is a handout for the delegation, as well as I emailed that to you yesterday. Anybody has a copy?
Mr. Miltenberger, you have the floor.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I have with me tonight Isaiah Wilson, who's the curator of the museum. I brought him along to put him on the front line with this issue, because he's responsible for the collection and a lot of all of the museum-related issues that go on in the museum. Before I speak specifically to the museum, I'd just like to step back and up a bit, just a bit of context, political context, and my other interests in this issue. So I work with a group, I work with the Center for Indigenous Environmental Resources, a nonprofit national organization out of Winnipeg. And we had come to town over 2 years ago now, 3 years ago, because we had funds given to us based on our proposal to work on co-governance and collaboration between municipal governments and Indigenous governments at a community level to deal with issues of common concern that they resolve and deal with their jurisdictions that they currently have. I knew the mayor, I know the councillors, specifically at the time, Councillor McDonald. And we talked about Fort Smith and the need for the governments to start working together. And the town took the initiative and invited us to come to Fort Smith this year with resources, and we worked with the council and Métis, Salt River, Smith Landing for about 3 years, I think, if you check right back. The councils, the governments had decided collectively when we met that yes, they wanted us here. The town was the point of the spear. The need to collaborate on issues of common concern, recognizing the last 10 years what has happened to the community as the territorial government has shifted its political priorities back to centralizing services and moving positions out of the community. We have all can see the result of the last 10 years. As you look at the college, you look at the jail, you look at the trail cross, the recognition being we can't sit around and wait for the territorial government to decide what's going to happen to us or Canada, that we need to collaboratively as governments gather around a table and figure out what we're going to do as a community to try to diversify and move to a more independent status together. And with this process, the Collaborative Leadership Initiative, we worked on that relationship to getting this all done so that the governments and the leaders were in agreement. And this culminated on June 21st, 2024, with the signing of the Memorandum of Agreement among the governments, town, Smith Landing, Salt River, and the Métis, and a historic agreement that you all have copies of. I would think you've seen it. And the issue of trying to do a number of things, but one of the big ones was revitalize the economy, as well as do a better job as you're opening recognition of the Métis and the First Nations, trying to do a better job of how we look at our history and how we move forward. There's been a lot of work done with the Tabacha Leaders Council. One of the big issues that everybody's concerned about when you look at the MOA, in addition to the economy and related to the economy, is the outstanding issues tied to heritage, culture, and our history. So, in all of this, I've been a part of that. At the same time, I'm the chair of the Northern Life Museum and Cultural Center, and from the start, it's been in my mind why I took this role was because I've watched people, Deputy Mayor Keiser, Couvret, and many others who've worked for literally decades trying to keep the doors of the museum open. An asset that is irreplaceable, that has a huge storehouse of the combined history of a lot of the Western Arctic, but definitely around Fort Smith, and have done that on a shoestring budget. At the same time, I've met with the leaders, and they all talk about they would like to have cultural centers of their own. They would like to somehow be able to capture their own history in a way that reflects life around us. And these two needs have come together in my mind. That's why we're here. On one hand, the museum, we are surviving, but as Deputy Mayor Keiser, Councillor Couvret will tell you, Patricia was also on the board. When I say survive, the image I want you to think about is we're treading water. We have an asset that could be amazing, but in the current circumstances, we worry about surviving. At the same time, there is an opportunity to make tourism, the heritage and culture of this region, the whooping cranes, all the unique assets we have here, a centerpiece of a diversified economy that has government, but more importantly, governments involved in a way that they've never been before. And hence the suggestion that the museum, the museum board's actually the Northern Anthropological Society, and it is the owner, lock, stock, and barrel of the museum, and the land, and everything that is in that museum, the thousands of artifacts. At the same time, I know from the leaders that there's an interest in the Métis, Smith Landing, Salt River, in trying to capture, and the town, trying to do a better job capturing this critical history. And what we have is an opportunity to take a huge asset that is just now surviving because it exists separate from the governance structures that run the town and the governments, and has all the history and have all these unresolved issues that can be dealt with, but not as long as the museum is separate. So the proposal is that we look at, and we have the complete authority to do this, that there's an agreement for the four governments to take on, that will transfer the museum to the governments, and they will own 25% each, town, the Métis, Smith Landing, Salt River, and they would become the governments that, like governments everywhere, that would own their own physical artifacts, history, and culture that is contained within the museum. In doing so, it does two things. It fits right into the plan of the community that the Tobachi leaders are pushing for, which is a whole different kind of economy that reflects the history here, and things like the whooping crane and the potential to expand with access to funding that would be available once the governments are involved, to access federal funds, heritage funds, reconciliation funds, cultural funds, as well as from the territorial government, so that finally the Northern Life Museum will have the home that was always meant to have, the politics way back in the 70s predates reconciliation, treaties, UNDRIP, TRC, the awareness of working with governments in the community. In fact, the indigenous governments weren't even involved in the development of the museum. And for the long-termers, everybody that's been here will know what happened with the history where the church made deals with the government and things didn't work out. They created boards and they handed off things like the museum to the community. And over time, we have seen what has happened to the church. They basically have moved to Yellowknife and left the parish to its own abilities to see how they can keep it running, as well as a museum. So today I'm here to make the case that this is a perfect confluence of time and events where an asset that has been sitting there waiting, because of this MOA, and only because of this MOA are we in a position, in the work done by the council and the other governments, to reach that agreement. We're in a position to look around and see how do we reprofile what's important in our community. And this museum, I would submit to you, is one of the most important institutions we have, and it can flourish in ways that right now we don't even really fully, I don't think, recognize. But once there's resources, then there's a home and there's political oversight by the governments, then the museum will finally be where it's supposed to be. A few weeks back, I sent around a note, Councillor Coover had circulated, the folks in the Yukon got $25 million, First Nations, to do the very thing, to try to do the very thing that we have here that is just waiting to be taken on and allowed to flourish under the guidance and the direction of the leadership in ways that reflect culture, heritage, and history. So I'd just like to give Isaiah a couple of minutes to just speak to the collection and the importance of the museum. And he's been there, he's not long yet, but he's been there and he's right in the deep end, and he will give us a sense of exactly what a treasure we have here that's just waiting to burst into bloom.
Yeah, so as Michael said, I've only started this position on September 3rd, so I'm really just moving into the position and learning more about what the museum has. And it has 17,000 artifacts within the doors. That's a staggering number. And each artifact was either donated by someone from the community or collected by the Oblet brothers who founded the museum in the 70s. Currently at the museum, every artifact is being managed by 3 people. I'm the primary person that's handling and looking at and going through everything to ensure that it's all organized. And the problems with the museum surrounding the monetary concerns are that at times we don't have the proper budget to properly care for these artifacts. So on the shoestring budget, we're watching artifacts slowly decay and our history being lost. And it's a slippery slope that's dangerous because we all want to preserve and ensure that we can share our stories, share the indigenous stories that otherwise would be lost if the museum were to go under. That's all I have.
So the hope opportunity is to create really what will be the cultural center for the community. I have in my mind this coming summer, for example, I want to find the money to put up a set of 4 flags in front of that museum that reflect town, the Métis, Smith Landing, Salt River. The 4 flags of the governments whose history and culture are housed there. And that the leaders are already talking around the table about we should be doing things at the museum as that cultural center. We have an artifact, to me, that is one of the most important, and that's that Treaty 8, the traveling copy of the Treaty 8 from 1899 that survived somehow and is there. And we are in the heart of Treaty 8. And that Treaty 8 was all the way north, all the way down to BC, and we have the only existing copy outside Ottawa of that treaty. That alone is something that I know the governments are very interested in. So we have June 21st, we have all sorts of events that could happen there. And I've talked to the folks, Travis Mercury in Yellowknife in Culture, and he looks after all the heritage funding for the government. And he sent us a long email once again that we had sent out a while back, and his enthusiasm at the idea and the opportunities that would be created by a museum that could send out proposals far and wide in all the funding areas that has the 4 logos of the governments that are supporting that is their museum. And there are no places that I know of where that kind of agreement exists yet. That gives us that capacity that's not available. So there it is, the whole property and a close to $500,000 a year budget that can grow is there waiting to be of much greater service to the community. The kind of service that your recognition that you say speaks about, and the kind of recognition that the MOA captures in its principles and priorities. And all it will take is, and I'm here first because the town has been the point of the spear on this whole process. I'm here first because all it takes is a simple yes. Let's do this, and we can do the paperwork. We have all the documents. We just draft up the agreement, and all of a sudden the whole face of the community will change, because that place will come to life almost as fast as things came to life the minute they signed that MOA in June 21st. Things started changing, and this is one of the changes that is coming because of that opportunity. So my hope is that you'll think about this. You've signed on the MOA, you want to rebuild the community, and we're here saying we have an asset here that you can take and you can make it grow tenfold in value. Cultural value, political value, social value, a way to bring the community together, speak to the economy, speak to reconciliation, bring those together. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miltenberger, and very good presentation. I can honestly say I think as council definitely won't let this slide by us. We'll definitely give it great consideration. And I like what you've had to say tonight. And, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Miltenberger. My question is, because of the treaty that is kept in storage there, has it ever thought that it would be repatriated back to the nations that signed it?
Yes, that's why I'm here.
Okay.
For the first time, they won't have to go to somebody else's museum to see something. They will, with this agreement, they will own that in joint, and in a way that can't be broken up once the deal is signed. But then, for the first time, that will be they'll be the owners, the four governments.
So the town is the first spearhead, but there's 3 other indigenous nations that those artifacts to share that history with. So there's a repatriation toolkit called More Than Giving Back, Move to Action. It's activating undriven Canadian museums. I've been reading a little bit on it since you presented this. Like everything that is in that museum has been donated, confirmed.
Sorry, is that a question?
Yeah.
So, my hearing's not that good, I can't read the lips.
Yeah.
So, you want to know if everything has been donated?
Yes.
Yes.
Has any of those items been offered as a repatriation to any of the nations within our community?
I'm here to offer it all.
Okay. So maybe a way that we could inspire the other 3 nations is that for them to have a display, that treaty within their territory, on their treaty days, showing that these are our ancestors, they signed this. It truly belongs to them anyways, right? The museum is just a caretaker of it.
I think, I jump in here at one point. I was involved in this process right from the get-go with Michael, and I have to admit I was skeptical at the start, very skeptical and questioning. What he's proposing today, I think Patty will deal with a lot of, Councillor, will deal with a lot of what you're trying to say. This isn't a gesture of, because I was skeptical, and I've asked Michael a lot of questions over the years, and as he's worked through this exercise, this isn't just a gesture of sort of, you put your name on the letterhead. This is bringing them in and giving them pieces of the museum. It took me a long time to wrap my head around that, but I have to say, having been on the museum board for over 20 years, I think it's an absolutely brilliant, may not be the right word, but it is a,
Brilliant, I'll take it.
you'll take brilliant. But no, there is so much of the assets of the museum, when you heard how many articles they have, and some of the provenance is questionable or confusing as to where it came from and what band. So like the copy of Treaty 8, is it Salt Rivers? Is it Smith's Landings? Is it Port Reses? Is it Hay Rivers? Like, where did it come from? That I don't know that anybody can really answer. Isaiah, you'd have to go look in the collection to see that.
I think I might have an answer.
You might, yeah. So, you get into that quagmire, to me, and that's what we were talking about. There's no easy answer. The answer is you could do that, and you could try and break all the collection apart into chunks and give pieces to everybody, or you could stop that, keep the collection together, and say to everybody, why don't you own the collection? It's yours. Come into the room, it's yours, sit at the table, be part of the management, make the decisions, it's yours. So when you want to do a Treaty 8 display, it's yours, come and do it. That was the eureka moment for me on the board. When Michael and I had a couple of chats, I don't even know if he remembers, but that's when the light bulb for me started to go from being really questionable, really saying, well, is this just another lip service? Get on the board, we'll put you on the letterhead and keep going. What I can tell you, and unless you've changed anything, that is not this case. Like, they are going to be signed on the dotted line owners of the assets, of the collection. They will have input to the decisions, how they're managed. And that's what I left the museum board to join this council, and I said, that was my understanding, and what I heard tonight, just to reinforce that, Michael, so well done in your presentation. But I would say, some of what you're asking, I think if you give this some chance to grow to fruition, and all the discussions happen with the Métis and Salt River and Smith Landing with the museum, and they come back to us with a proposal that everybody's in, I think 90% of what you're asking for, if not more, will be met. That's just my gut reaction, and that's just my learning experience going through 20 years on the board. Because I was back on it long before Michael came on, and when we were talking, we weren't ever talking about this kind of control. So I find it interesting, and nice to see it still going forward. What I wanted to ask you, Michael, is tonight, did you want like a motion from you said yes. Did you want a motion from us saying yes, we're on board, or yes, we're going to talk about it? What did you want from us tonight?
Proper procedures that we don't. We ask questions, we take the information, and we discuss it later.
Okay,
There's no
there we go.
decisions made.
Then I guess I can't ask you that question. Sorry,
Yeah.
my bad.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just elaborate a bit on this is not just a symbolic.
No,
We have the signed documents at the museum that were signed between the church and the Northern Anthropological Society, the official transfer documents. And the caveat in there is, of course, if we're gonna sell anything, the church gets the right of first refusal. If things go so bad that we shut the doors, and I point out at one point, not that very long ago, the museum was closed for a number of years just because of the struggle, that the keys get turned over to the town. This predates all the politics I talked about earlier. Now we have this agreement, and we have 4 governments that are now ready to sit around the table and say, that's an asset that should be the government's. And governments need the actual physical infrastructure, and there will be the title to all this stuff. The board that I'm sitting on, I'm suggesting would continue to work under the direction of under that new arrangement. And the other interesting thing about this, it will open the doors because the town, Métis, Smith Landing, Salt River, all have money, resources as they try individually to deal with their own issues, heritage, culture, when in fact it is all linked. And when you talk to the leaders and you talk to people about, well, you got 17,000 artifacts to start with. And those now become the ownership of the governments in town. And the other thing I'm suggesting is we won't go away and come back. I'm suggesting there's buy-in to this, that we strike a working group, we bring out all the documents to do the detailed work to convert that agreement, strike out the Northern Anthropological Society, redo the documents, divide it up, and with the caveats that once you own 25%, if you leave, that's a permanent deal, that nobody can walk away and say, I want my 25% when I leave. But we will do that, and we'll put that document on the table before all the councils.
Councilor
So you
Brennan?
said, thank you, you said that the church and the
Logical.
yeah, that, the church owned it first and then it got transferred to the anthro, and then, and they own it lock, stock and barrel?
Lock,
But
stock.
now you said something about the church, they get first,
Right, it was. So, to not confuse you, in that agreement done in 1972, they just had some fail-safe clauses in here. One of them was, if any artifacts were gonna be sold, they got the right of first refusal. What I'm proposing here, we're not selling anything, so we're not changing, all we're changing is we're recognizing the ownership is gonna now be with the 4 governments, and the Northern Anthropological Society will probably get renamed to reflect the change, and it would be run by this board on behalf of and under the direction of.
that's the Anthropological Society.
anthro.
So,
Councilor Cox?
just one final comment. I don't want to put added complications here, but I met with President Herron, and there's an election coming. Patricia told me sometime in the spring maybe, or late winter. Smith Landing is having an election in, I think, about the same time Salt River is doing it, having an
September.
election in
September.
October.
September.
So
I heard you.
the town has the benefit of been through that process, and as point of the spear, my suggestion would be, if there's an interest, be nice to try to, and it's pretty straightforward because we have all the documents, we have all the authorities we need to get it. If this was going to get done before there's another cycle of potentially 3 elections within, I mean, we can live through, we live through it anyway, but in this case, if there's a planning window, and I would suggest, there's not much to debate. I mean, we're negotiate, we can have this, but not have that. It's all there, and everything, staff, budgets, the building, everything will continue. It'll just, the paper change is important.
Thanks. I think it sounds super exciting. And I think lots of potential there to be very successful. I guess the questions that come to my mind, and you correct me if I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I guess in terms of the town and what we need to consider would be kind of how it would change funding. And this is where you guys would know better on how the museum is funded now, how much is GWT dollars, how much is town dollars, fundraising, whatever. I mean, ultimately, what does it cost us as a town to buy into that partnership kind of annually and on going forward? And I guess the other concern would be, like you say, and not to say that would happen, but what happens in 10, 15 years, something goes awry, one of the organizations wants out, or there's a disagreement. How do we avoid, like, can we set up the agreements now to avoid the lawyers taking all of it in the end when there's a disagreement? And that's probably stuff you guys have already thought about a lot, but.
So, first, the way I would be suggesting we approach this is we get the political agreement and we identify the political hot button issues and we figure out what the solution is. We use the lawyers as what they should be, the sort of the legal mechanics. They're going to put in legal terms what we politically agreed to, in language that's going to be done in front of everybody. So you're going to be you're going to be taking on an asset that is going to be bringing in, I would suggest, far more money than right now the town does very gracious 35 grand a year. We get fuel at the town rate. And from a financial point of view, that's pretty well it. We get all our funding through the territorial government, federal government. We take advantage of student hiring, but it's just because of who we are, just a small non-profit. We don't have access to millions of dollars of federal money tied to other funding pots, heritage, culture, reconciliation, history. And it's the same with the territorial government. I would also suggest that when this takes place and the governance structure is clear, that alone will complement what's being done at the Museum Cultural Center, and you will have nonprofit groups that have money that will come in on a project basis. Could be Whooping Cranes, could be anything, indigenous issues, the Treaty 8, it'll just gives so many more opportunities. So the issue of, if any of us could figure out 15 years, we'd probably be doing making a lot more money doing something else. The design has to be, you have this circle, 4 pieces. That circle stays a circle. It never gets broken. Doesn't get broken into triangles. So the parties sign on knowing that. And it has to be that way so that you can live through, like the MOA is going to exist long after the signatories, Chief Heron, President Heron, Mayor Daniels and Chief Paulette are gone. That's the whole point of these political agreements, to give that certainty and comfort so that people would be willing to do this together.
So I just want to make sure I heard this correctly. So Chief Paulette, Chief Herron, and President Herron have all agreed that this
This
is
is the
something-
TLC, I believe you were talking to, right? You're talking about Tabacho Leadership Council signatories?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
So the concern is because it's an election year, that might fall to the side, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
I believe what you said was that, if I may, I think it's two different things. What he just talked about was that the TLC will live on past the signatories.
Mhm.
The other part is concerned that if you get momentum towards this museum proposal, and then there's an election, and then everything halts, and you have to start again with a whole new council. So I feel like there's two different
Yes.
things there.
So, yeah, more.
So, do you know what I mean? So that,
I hear what you're saying, but
Okay.
it's up to the leadership that's elected to make those decisions for the nations, right?
Yes.
it was just concerned that if you get momentum going, then it would stop, and then it would have to get built up again. It was a timing factor.
Okay. Thank you.
The town council is, Mr. Chairman, is a case in point. We put our foot on the brake. We came to you, those of you that were here in the previous council, we had a discussion about this, recognizing that we're putting it on the table, but there's an election coming, and we'll wait. And so that's what we've done. We sent out the letter, and we've waited. I met with President Herron yesterday, and hopefully to meet with his council soon. And I want to work as well with Salt River and Smith Landing. But now the town has been the point of the spear. The Tabacho leaders have acknowledged that it makes the most sense for the mayor to be the chair of the TLC because it's the government that everybody votes for. So that's why we're here first. And this is an offshoot of all the work of the Collaborative Leadership Initiative and a logical next step.
If I may?
Mhm.
We have exceeded our time for delegations, willingly. I think, I would like to suggest that if there's no more questions, that we take this and then we bring this forward for consideration in a future agenda. And there may be some direction to administration to do some fact-finding based on different questions you have.
I have one last question.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not preempting that. I'm just saying that once that's sort of where we end. Delegations are typically 10 minutes. And what they are generally, it's my fault for not educating the council, the new council members on a delegation, is that it is, questions are asked and then it is discussed at a later time.
My last question is, because of your temperature regulated rooms, how are these power blackouts affecting you guys at the museum? And can you put a dollar amount to it?
So dollar amount to,
Oh, yeah.
Like, yeah.
sorry.
A dollar amount to what it's costing, what the brown and blackouts are costing you in terms of extra labor, extra machinery costs.
Well,
Or just like corruption of artifacts?
Yeah.
we have stuff that was built in the 70s. The last power outage, the furnaces kicked off, even in spite of all these other fail-safe things, the constant on and off. But we were able to sort that out. Plus, we had a very friendly plumber, Wade Johnson, came in, who had installed some of the stuff, and he made sure everything was running. He said, thank you. So part of the growing and flourishing is going to be, there's lots of modernizing that needs to get done. We have artifacts wrapped in plastic, kayaks, those type of things that are pretty rudimentary kind of temperature control. So, but we just make do with the money we have.
I think she was just asking, because we're looking at what these continued brownouts and blackouts are impacting everybody, and what the cumulative costs are of these. I think she was asking a question on a bigger discussion than specific to the museum.
I'd be happy to give you a number, but if it'll help your campaign, but
I'll talk to Isaiah about that.
It's an amendment.
Yeah.
So for
I'll have my
now,
people talk to your people.
so for now, I guess we're in general agreement that this will be discussed at a later date. However, I think I'd like to note that this does seem to be a time-sensitive issue. So I would like to put a date forward to have this done.
Would you like me to do, may I? Sorry.
You may.
May I suggest that maybe I do a little bit of fact-finding on just what it could look like, and we have a conversation during community services next week?
Sounds great.
I think I can bring forward at least some very, very preliminary information, and we can start that discussion, which might lead to the next steps at least.
Mr. Milberger, what timeline are you looking at?
well, I'm at the not Mercy, but I'm just waiting political direction. So you know the window. We're ready to roll. We have this stuff. We're pulling together the documents as we speak. My wife's doing some volunteer work in the archives, and she's got all those documents pulled out specifically to start creating the packages we're going to need to send to the parties to look at the numbers and the agreements and the massive list of artifacts and that type of stuff.
Take a direction. Give me a,
I like what you said about having it ready for next.
is that the recommendation? Do I come up with the wording for that?
Yes. Sounds good.
Yeah, recommendation for community, I'll have a brief and note. Okay.
I'd like to thank you, gentlemen, for a very well done presentation. Thank you very much.
Can you make that recommendation, please? I need somebody to give me the direction. Chair? I need someone to give me the direction, so I need a mover and a shaker.
I'll make the motion as worded.
Oh, you have to read it.
I could have said that.
Just second
Oh,
it.
you were looking so
I second
surprised.
Technically speaking, yes, you're supposed to, but
Yes.
we'll let this one slide. And seconder?
Sure.
Connie?
Okay, all in favor? Motion carried.
I abstain.
You abstain? One abstain, you got that?
I got it.
Okay. Moving on, Corporate Services Director's Report for December.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So the report was in your packages, and I believe I had a chance to read it over. One of the items that was brought up at the last meeting was that the committee would like to know of any vacancies within the departments. So we're reporting that the Director of Corporate Services position is still vacant, although it's being filled on an interim basis by myself. Until either a new director is hired or the end of April.
I don't know why you laughed.
Yeah. So, and the position is being advertised nationally through civicjobs.ca, Indeed, and it is posted on the town's website as well. A recruiter has been contracted to assist in filling that position, which should help in getting the word out to people who are in the business of being, financial people in municipalities and that type of thing. So more directed recruitment may bear greater fruit as far as finding a replacement. We also have an accounts receivable clerk position, which has become vacant very recently. And that job was just posted today on internal posting on the town's.
It's just internal through
Yes,
email and
yes.
posted on our local or our
Yes.
common boards.
That's correct. So that'll be posted for 7 days, and we'll see if we get any qualified internal candidates, and if not, why, then we may look externally for filling that position. Until we do, we're covering off the position with existing staff, and everyone is really pitching in to try and keep the position going and doing the essential things that need to be done as part of that position. So the December utility billing that normally comes out in January probably will come out at later in the month rather than like by the 10th of the month, which is what we strive for. But there will be utility bills coming out in January for the month of December. So now that the postal strike is over, we're back to regular business as far as paying our bills and distributing mail and that type of thing. The other thing that corporate services is working on for the next several months will be year end. It's a big process. We have to prepare all of our financial reporting and everything to get that ready for the auditors, and we should be able to get the audit done by the end of April, which is a requirement under the Cities, Towns and Villages Act, and we'll certainly do everything we can to meet those deadlines, and with as minimal assistance from the auditors and doing routine bookkeeping things that we're capable of doing. So the impact on the budget won't be as great this year as we may have seen in previous years. The other thing that we're working on is budget preparation, and there will be some back and forth. The SAO and the directors will meet to discuss budget before it comes to you for discussion. So that's an ongoing process, and the SAO could speak to timelines on that better than I could, but those are the things that corporate services is working on at this time. Thank you.
SAO.
I wasn't gonna help him, I was just leaving it. As part of, to sort of continue on that conversation, I did want to bring forward, and I was gonna bring it forward via email, so I'm just putting it out there to start thinking about it, is I'd like to have just sort of an introductory working meeting next week, just to sort of present where we are with the budget. We're gonna do some tweaking. Tomorrow we're having our SMC meeting is budget focused. And then I was hoping that early or mid next week, we could sit down as a council, like just sort of walk you through where we're at, what the process looks like, what the timeline is, and what some of the, pinch points are right now that we're working our way through. So if that's okay, I'll throw it out via email on just a time for us to have a working group meeting and see what works for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Is that good? Good? Okay, thank you.
Councillor Heaton.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, before we actually sit down to talk about budgets, is like, can we ask the public, our community, what they think we should be spending money on? Like, remember Councillor Benoit, like she did that Facebook blast asking people exactly what they wanted to see change, what they were hoping for. I feel like we got a lot of information from that prior to the discussion at the rec center. So like, is that normal, asking community members ideas about budgetary issues?
I haven't engaged in that before. I have done like presentations or shared it out. It goes out as part of our package and information packages, sort of say, here's where we're going, we're looking at, you know, here's the pie, this much is on administration, here's what we're spending this on, here's what it consists of, more information out. It's fairly, the operational budget is very, very focused on our services, on the service level. And that'll be some of the pinch points that will come to council, is that here's where we might need to tighten our belt, and here's how we directly impact service levels.
But we could alleviate, like, we would be more informed about what the community wants when it does come to those pinch points, right? Like, I think I'm on the communications committee? Like, is that maybe something we can do? Just ask
I
the
mean, I think
community?
absolutely as we drive service levels and we go further down, maybe even to the strategic planning, using surveys, using that, I feel like the community plan was that process was a really good way for us to capture sort of what's the long range and what is the community looking for. I'm not sure at the operational budget if this is the time for that, because we're fairly restricted. It's a fairly tight budget. There's not a lot of room for a wish list within that one.
Copy that.
And did you, sorry, Director, did you have anything to add to that?
I was gonna say, we've got some experienced people on the table and some inexperienced people on the table, most of us inexperienced. But Len, you've done budgets with the town. Mike, you've done budgets with the town. Jim, you've done budgets with the town. I can't answer Patty's question. It's a fair question, yeah, I think, in some ways, but I can't answer it because I have no clue how we do it yet. I'm still learning. You guys bring experience. Has that happened in the past? Do you have any concerns about what she's been raising?
Have we actually communicated with the public?
In advance
I'm not
of?
sure if we have. But I think when it comes to budget, rather than having most of it prepared, I think council should actually sit down and say, what services do we as a council want to provide? What services are we lacking in right now? And I think that would be the way to go forward, and there may be other areas on the budget which I would say, let's put this to rest for a while, let's put this for a rest. Let's get our roads fixed. Let's get our parks fixed. We're spending lots of money on walking trails and stuff. We have no benches for people to rest. We have no garbage receptacles around how many kilometers of trails. We have to start looking. If we're gonna put these assets out there for people to use, we have to make them so they're usable for the public. And not having rest places, especially for senior citizens, is not working.
Would that be part of our strategic planning stuff that we're doing in February? And then I'm assuming that between the strategic planning and the budget stuff, which is probably gonna be happening close to the same time, in the next month, we should have a much better idea of how things will unfold and flow maybe?
Also, just to speak directly to Councillor Tuckey's statement, that's more the capital plan, or that's more the capital budgeting that you're talking about the assets. The budget that we're working on right now is our operational, so it's keeping the lights on, it's doing the services, it's the staffing and the programming. So I think, and just to clarify, that it's not so much about the trails and the assets that we would add to that.
Well,
yeah.
it's true, but I think.
But I also agree with Councillor Cox that that is a part of your long-term strategy and it's sort of your overall look of where do we want to be, where do we want to go?
I'm looking more or less is where have we come and how did we get there and not do the things that we should have done. Like we have roads that are in total disrepair right now.
And just a point of order, as chair, are you supposed to be
Well,
elaborating it at this point?
would you like to take the chair?
Well, I'm just, Mike said his name a couple of times, so maybe you can
Okay,
take the pressure off you for a
Mr.
second.
Hooverette.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Having gone through this process quite a few times, I fully agree with Councillor Heaton's idea of consulting the public, but first thing that we need to know before we even start that process, are we talking about a balanced budget with a surplus? Are we looking at a budget with a deficit of 1%, a deficit of 15%? The questions that come up especially when we're looking at a budget where we're looking at an increase of taxes by, say, 5%, we'll just throw that number out there, is what services are we going to have to impact to be able to bring it down to a more acceptable rate? Or have a conversation with the public, are they willing to accept a 5% increase for council, the town, to be able to continue the level of service at the level they are. If they're not really happy about paying 5% more in taxes, then we have to have that conversation, is what services can we start looking at rolling back? I fully agree that that is part of the consultation process. Once we have a draft budget to look at and we know what we're facing in the way of surpluses, highly unlikely, but what is our deficit projected for next year, and how do we minimize that deficit? We have to pass a balanced budget. We cannot, that's, with municipal governments, we are obligated to pass a balanced budget. We cannot project a deficit.
Councillor Benro.
Thank you. But by asking the public their opinions on where they want to see, what they want to see done, or where they want money spent, it'll give us an idea whether it's corporate or municipal or whatever, you know, the.
Operational.
Yeah, the operational. And then as a strategic planning, at least we'll have an idea as to where we're gonna go in trying to get things done that our community wants done. And then budget within what we have.
Just make one observation, I don't think anybody's against talking to the public. I think what I'm hearing, what I'm thinking was, I've looked at budgets over the years, is in other work, is going out to people with a question that's sort of like a wish question, without any parameters. I liked what Michael said about, Councilor Courette said about having some parameters, so that you go out and you say to people, okay, you know, it's not like, in a best case situation, what would you like us to spend question?
No.
But in a situation where we have only this amount of money, and it comes down to shoveling sidewalks or shoveling roads, what would you prefer us to work on? It's a much more focused question that is linked to the money that you're dealing with, as opposed to just a, gee, what would you wish we spent money on question.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a matter of not asking the public, it's asking the public within a framework that doesn't get that, their expectations of saying, well, I'd really love it if, you know, if you plowed my driveway every day, and they'll say, well, we were never gonna plow your driveway, but thanks for your suggestion. Like, you know, that, I don't wanna do that to anybody as a counselor. I don't wanna say, well, here's what you want, and then turn around and say, well, we were never gonna do that anyways. It's not that kind of question. It's a very serious question about, we have this much money, these services or capital assets are available. So I think you need to frame it out the way Councilor Courette laid it out. I guess the question is, when do you ask the public to get the best input? So that you're not asking that gee whiz question, but you're asking that, here's what we have, with the priorities we need to set, what would you like to influence? So it's a bit more down the road, that's all, in my mind.
Councillor Heaton.
Thank you. I definitely hear what you're saying. Deputy Mayor, word is mayor today.
It's acting very nice.
But like online surveys are pretty easy to generate nowadays, and it's not gonna be an open-ended question, like what's your dream of Fort Smith in 2025? Like, no, these are the categories, these are the options we have. We're just trying to collect data from our own community. That's how we're all feeling, because we're so remote from Yellowknife, and I wanna make sure that we as mayor and council are actually communicating with our community, right? Like, making decisions that the community feels they're being heard. Targeted survey questions, no promises, obviously, this is just informational. And I would love to do that, the communications committee.
Councillor Kurzak, would you like to take the chair?
I can.
Thank you.
Councillor Becky.
I totally agree with what you're saying, but then again, you're gonna have to be very careful.
Yes.
You're gonna put a public survey out there, and I'm gonna tell you, you're gonna get the same information that we've gotten for the last 4 years.
But it would
We'd
be
like the
different-
graveyard to look like a graveyard, a respectable place for our dead people
Yeah.
to lay. We'd like to see a hot tub, we'd love to see the sauna, which has been sitting in that swimming pool for 25 years, but it's not available to the public. And this is why I'm saying we're gonna have to look at the budget, and we might have to put some things to aside to give to the public what they should have had all along, and they've been asking for how many years now? How many years do we go on without a hot tub, without a sauna? I mean, things go wrong. People have to come up. There's a problem here, and we have to start thinking of solutions. We are lacking in solutions. The people who bring problems to council bring the problem, but they don't bring any solutions. We need them to help us as much as they need us to help them to come up with solutions to better serve the public. And I get really annoyed when I hear someone say, we have to balance our budget, whatever, and what services are it going to cost? The taxpayers are giving us the money. It shouldn't cost them anything. We have to start. We have a beautiful swimming pool, hot tub and a sauna. That should be automatic. That should have been a problem that should have been fixed up probably 3-4 councils ago. But we had a lot of problems in the last council. People wanted this, they wanted this. They wanted us to fix the cemetery, which we decimated. You know, and well, I think you should communicate to the public what would they like to see us do over the next year. And they've come up with the same things. They'd like to see us on 7 days a week, or whenever the pool's open. They'd like to see the hot tub open. I've had people say to me, you know, I do a lot of traveling. I've never gone into a hotel and see a hot tub not working. I've never seen a sauna not working. Why is it everybody else can keep these things going, but Fort Smith can't? And honestly, to tell you the truth, my answer to them is, I don't know. Because I don't. I've heard excuses. Oh, it's a very small hot tub. Look at most hotels, they're very small hot tubs. I don't know. I don't have the answers.
Okay,
But
thank you.
I do feel the frustration of the community. That's all I'm going to
I
say.
think we're drifting from the topic. Councillor Coyle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know if we should be going down that road. I think the level of service that we provide through our recreation center are pretty damn good. Reading just the newspaper and radio articles and things like that, over the past 5 years, how often has the Inuvik swimming pool been closed? It's barely been open from things like that. You look at Hay Rivers swimming pool, another comparison that's been made. That was a newly refurbished thing in 2018. I think what our community and staff and everybody is doing to keep our facilities going here with the monies that we give them, which are inadequate, and that's mainly due to shortfalls in funding from the GNWT. I think we're doing a hell of a good job of providing services to our community. I challenge anybody to say that they can go to a community comparable to Fort Smith and find the availability of services and amenities that we offer. Thank you.
SAO.
May I just suggest that we return to finishing off the report while we have the director here, and then maybe we can have this discussion during the budget workshop next week, if there's any next steps we want to discuss at that time.
I'll turn the chair back over to Councillor Tucky.
Sounds like a good idea. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kurzak.
Director, do you want to move on to the licensing report, or did you have anything further to add to your report?
Well, maybe since we've been on the discussion about budget, I mean, I think it bears that we should have the discussion around timelines as well. In a normal year, council would have to have a budget approved by December 31st. An O&M budget by December 31st. You were elected and sworn in at the end of October. The SAO was able to get an extension to the end of February to get the O&M budget approved. We're still here sitting the first week of January, so the timelines are still tight. to get a budget, if you're gonna do community engagement, if you're going to, you know, have the back and forth with, we wanna see this, we don't wanna see this, and that type of thing. So, for this first budget, and your first go-around as counselors for a lot of you, perhaps the process should be a little more simplified, where you look at the budget, you were all just elected, you all have a good feel for what the public interest is. Maybe for this process, you learn, you know, how things have to be done and on the timelines that need to be done. And you take your experience as counselors and newly elected counselors and bring that to the table and say, you know, this is what the level of service that we think that we need. And then as that gets approved, leading up to the next budget period, September, August, you can start with public engagement, you can start with dealing with the public and that type of thing, and you have a better idea of how things operate and just the limitations that we have. So with the timelines that we have and the number of new counselors that we have around the table, perhaps this process should be a learning experience and a simplified process. And then as you move into your second budget, you can make those decisions, you can engage with the public, you can do all those things where you can have a real impact on the community and on that budget, and also the capital budget at the same time. So that would be sort of my final comments around the budgeting and the budgeting process. So, you know, with timelines and that type of thing, maybe we simplify this one, the next budget, we look at the public engagement portion of it and do it that way, so, just my
I'm
input.
grateful every day that he's here. Every day I'm grateful.
Called the KISS principle?
Yes. We're going with Sweetie for that last S.
Okay, so we're finished with the director's report. Moving
Yeah,
on.
so next one we have is the licensing report. Does anybody have any questions about that or the accounts paid list? There's also a correspondence list in there and accompanying correspondence is in the package.
Does anybody have any questions on accounts payable?
I went through it, I didn't have anything.
Any questions regarding the correspondence?
It's safe to say we can move on to administration. Ms. Thomas?
I don't have anything other than the correspondence at this time in regards to the corporate services meeting.
Do we need a motion to accept the director's report or not?
It's just for, as information.
There is a recommendation,
Is there a recommendation?
yeah.
So at the
Top of the
tower
cor-
and
At the top of the director's report, there's a recommendation to accept it.
Oh,
As
sorry, looking at the back or.
So can I have a motion to accept the director's report?
I move that we accept the director's report as presented.
Thank you. Seconder? Mr. Cox? All in favor? Motion carried. And I believe we're finished. Oh,
Excuse me, councilors, meeting next week, maybe?
actually, just hold on for a second. The snack program at JBT?
I beg your pardon?
The snack program at JBT is asking for a contribution.
No, it's done.
No,
Oh,
they
it's
were,
just-
Done?
they were
Okay.
thanking us for.
Thank you, Larry, okay. Okay, so, let's see.
It'll be Mayor
Can I have a
Ferguson
motion
and
for-
Councillor Bathe.
I'll move that Mayor Ferguson and Councillor Bathe be excused.
Seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Couverture? All in favor? So carried. Next Corporate Services Standing Committee meeting will be held on February 4th, 2025. And I have a motion to adjourn the meeting at 7:16.
The meeting be adjourned at
We had to
7:50.
say it.
Oh, meeting adjourned at 7:16.
Seconder?
Sure.
Mr. Cox? All in favor? So carried. Meeting adjourned.
We're gonna have a 2-minute break in between meetings.
Well, I can go, I gotta make a